According to NASA, we're going to face a 100-year-long drought. A drought more devastating than the 1930 Dust Bowl that forced America to plunge into crisis and left millions of people without the basics of life, like water and food. People think the drought from the past 15 years in California is a big deal, when in fact, it's only the beginning. The coming drought is so big that it's going to affect the entire continent, from Mexico to Canada, and it doesn't have anything to do with the global warming hoax, but with a strange weather pattern that happens once every 1,000 years. And the worst part is, this drought will crush the American civilization because we're completely unprepared. My name is John Gilmore, and in this short presentation, I'll explain why the mainstream ways for finding or storing water to quench your family's thirst will be useless in the coming 100-year drought. Why relying on them will actually make you vulnerable and dependent on FEMA, the government, or greedy water suppliers. And even worse, they put a big bullseye on your house, making you the best target for looters that will kill for a sip of water. And I'll also give you the answer for all these problems, a surprising invention from the Israeli army that makes water out of thin air, even in the desert. A portable water generator that gives up to 50 gallons of water per day. It doesn't matter if all the wells are dried out or if you live in the desert where it's so dry that even all the cactus has died. This method makes you truly independent. You'll never have to rely on a water well that might dry out soon, or on rain harvesting, if you're lucky enough to have rain, and if you live in one of the states where it's not banned yet. So stick with me, because you're about to find out how to tap into nature's secret water reservoir. Right before I got the chance to discover this miraculous solution, I almost died. Like I said, my name is John Gilmore. You might know me from Survivopedia.com. I'm a writer and an editor there. People usually seek my advice because I'm specialized in wilderness survival, and because I spent almost 2 decades studying every last type of survival situation. I try to help everyone I can, giving them practical, safe guidelines that would actually make a difference in survival scenarios. Perhaps even more important, I'm a proud father and husband, and I strive to make a positive mark in this world. I live on a small farm close to Arizona with my wife and my 14-year-old son, and we're self-sufficient people. We grow our own food and built our own house. We even dug our own well to have all the water we needed. Little did we know this drought was going to hit us so hard. 2 years ago, our well completely dried out. Each year, the water level in our well seemed to be dropping, and last year, it finally gave up on us. We didn't really panic because we had stockpiled a water supply of about 500 gallons. We knew it should last us long enough till we could dig a new well. A couple of nights after we applied for a new well, I heard some noises outside the house. I grabbed my rifle and rushed out to see what it was. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There were 2 men loading our water barrels into their truck. They didn't try to come in. They weren't looking for money or electronics. They were stealing the water we relied on for our survival. I felt a rush of rage and anger building inside me. I felt I could shoot them both right there on my property. But before I could aim my rifle, I felt the cold barrel of a gun pressed upon my neck. "Sorry, pal. We're taking your water." It was a third robber, and he was probably on the lookout. I got caught up in the moment, and I didn't see he was sneaking up behind me. Before I had the chance to say anything, he hit me with his gun. I heard a bang and felt this excruciating pain in the back of my head. And then I lost consciousness. My wife found me in a pool of my own blood after the water thieves left. I couldn't believe anyone would do such a thing. The drought turns people into savages. And then it hit me. What happens if the drought continues? What will people become? Will they even kill for water? People are already desperate. They turned into animals because the past 15 years have been rough on all of us. The drought hit us hard, and there's no signs it's going to get any better anytime soon. In fact, I discovered that the next war won't be fought for oil, but for water. The fight to grab the remaining water already started in America. It's a covered-up civil war. On one side, there's the corporations who buy all the water reserves they can, plus Obama's government, who's trying to pass EPA regulations that give the feds the right to confiscate our water on our lands as they see fit. On the other side, it's you and me, the people, who have no power to fight them. All those who are forced to pay for dirty tap water or their expensive bottled water. So why are they doing this? It's because of what NASA is predicting. NASA has scientific proof that we're facing a drought that's going to last 100 years. A 100-year mega drought, similar to the one that wiped out the American continent 1,000 years ago. This might come as a shock. You might say I'm full of beans or that I'm bending the truth. That's why I will try to back everything with hard facts. I'll show you proof that this mega drought is happening again. There's a reason why no real civilization developed on the American continent until the coming of European immigrants in the 17th century. Until then, America wasn't fit for modern life, for agriculture, and for building villages and cities. Why? Because for hundreds of years, America was a desert. In fact, December 2012, Columbia University published a frightening report. They found out that from around the year 900 and up to the year 1300, there was a mega drought on the American continent. It was so extreme that we have no modern comparison. It was the only time and place it ever happened. The bad news is, history repeats itself, and these harsh conditions that made modern life unbearable in America are now returning. This is the reason why NASA is using expensive satellites to study water, both above and below the ground. What's frightening is there's water disappearing all throughout the American continent, not just in the USA. Take Lake Mead, for example. The largest water reservoir in the U.S. now sinks to a record low. It reached its lowest level since the lake was first filled out in 1930. And that's not all. There are plenty of lakes in California just vanishing because of the high demand from households and parched farmers. The lakes just don't have enough time to fill themselves before they're drained dry again and again. And the result is shocking. Here's the picture of Lake Oroville that reveals the shriveling effects of the drought. Just imagine, if the drought keeps getting worse, and there's no proof of it getting any better, lakes like these can disappear in as little as 3 to 4 years. And it's happening on the entire American continent. We're turning into a desert. The Canadian Lake Superior, the world's largest freshwater lake, has dropped to its lowest level in 81 years. And that's not all. Since 2004, the Colorado River Basin, which supplies water for 40 million people in 7 states, has lost twice as much water as there is in the entire Lake Mead, our largest reservoir. The Ogallala Aquifer, America's largest source of underground water that supplies most of our wells and springs, is shrinking because of too much demand. It will be devastating to millions of people. In fact, when the Dust Bowl overtook the Great Plains in the 1930s and the Ogallala Aquifer wasn't discovered, the result was death, famine, and, the ones that were lucky enough, relocation. We all saw or heard about the consequences. Because of drought, people's lives changed dramatically. A family of 3 from East Porterville says they bathe by filling a bucket from the tank in the front yard, carry it inside, and pour water over their heads with a cup. Just imagine what it's like to flush the toilet and nothing happens. It's like you switch to an African lifestyle overnight. In Texas, there are thousands of cattle dying of thirst when they're not downright killed by their owners. Thousands of crops disappearing all throughout our country. People dying of thirst and dehydration. Old folks suffering of heat strokes. But what most people don't know is that it's going to be a lot worse. As the New York Times reports on the 5th assessment of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they mentioned in each of the next 80 years, America is expected to see less and less rainfall than in 2004, for instance, when the drought already was full-blown. And the 2000 to 2004 droughts already topped legendary events as the Dust Bowl of the 1930s. In fact, all these dots connect to a bigger picture. The American continent, from Canada to Mexico, is returning to the norm of 1,000 years ago, meaning 90% of the water we have now will be gone sooner than you think. There won't be any water for people to cook or wash, not even to drink, and that's when viruses will start to spread, just like it's happening in Africa. Diseases and infections that start with leaving your mouth and skin dry, then headaches, rapid heartbeats, and fever. People will fight over a sip of water just to stay alive. And because most of our crops will be gone, we'll have to fight over scraps so we don't starve. All this will lead to downright war. It happened already before. Drought led to the Syrian war. Most people think this is some kind of Mad Max scenario. It will never happen here. But it already did. Just think about the war in Syria. Nobody ever talks about how everything started. From 2006 to 2011, up to 60% of Syria's land experienced the worst long-term drought since civilizations began. By 2011, 3 million people lost their entire livelihood because of the drought. Then, in March 2011, the Syrian civil war began. The government against its own people, killing up to 300,000 people until now. In the U.S., the people who have the power already know how catastrophic the drought will be. And that's why the corporations and our government work together to secure all the water resources for themselves. On one hand, there's corporations like Nestle who bottle water in drought-crippled California. After all, it was the Nestle CEO who said water isn't a human right, and it should be privatized. Worse, there are more than 100 bottled water facilities operating in California. While people are suffering and don't have access to any clean, fresh water, the corporations grabbed whatever water resources were left and sold the water back to us in plastic bottles for up to $10 a gallon. And on the other hand, it's the government who uses EPA regulations to redefine the term navigable waters to even the smallest creek in your backyard. This means all the water on the American continent will be in the hands of the government. In fact, they'll have federal authority over your water and land.